I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
The stadium wasn't here last week.
Okay. Last night.
Last month, so.
Anything further? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstain?
Aye.
Motion carries. On to 6, discussion and possible action, text zoning changes, petitioners Tom Kelling, property address West 234, South 3555, West Paul Parkway, subsection 13-2-10-B, entitled offsets, subsection 13-2-10-D, entitled accessory building size and location, subsection 13-2-9, sub 12, entitled in-law units, and subsection 13-2-24, sub B, entitled limited jurisdiction, and section 13-3-3, entitled conservancy district, and this will be for a recommendation to the town board.
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Fisher?
if I might, I have comments on several of the proposed ordinance text changes. Many of them are grammar in nature, but I'd like first to talk to the 13-2-10 offsets. Pardon me? Yes. I desire not to argue with anyone tonight. The temperature in the room is warm enough. I understand there's a lot of passion, but I do think it's time to dispense a little bit of truth serum. I have been on the Plan Commission for approximately 30 years. Had the honor and pleasure of serving with, if I miss somebody tell me, but at least 4 people in this room, with Ms. Van Sock, she indicated since 1995. Mr. Flanagan for many years. I won't embarrass you and ask you when you began. With Chief Buchholz for many years. How long? Okay.
40 years.
For many years.
Started when I was 16.
Okay. You're 34 now, it's 18 years, right? Okay, with Chief Buchholz. Good to see people laugh a little bit. We need a moment of that, I think, to break the tension. With Mr. Flanagan, Chief Buchholz, and with Mr. White. Many of yours for 5 people in this room having that discussion. And I will tell you my recollection is, and I'm going to invite any of the rest of you to correct me if your recollection is different. We had many issues that we have taken up over that period of time where we have addressed this section of the ordinance as it pertains to placement of buildings, which pretty much was our understanding of a structure. Don't want to get lost in the details, there's some definition in there. But placement of buildings. And on many occasions, with the assistance of professional planners, we looked at the issue of where the conservancy or wetland was, what the 30-foot offset was, and to the best of my recollection, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we violated that provision of the ordinance that's been there for many years, and I think appropriately so. Because it's our ordinance and buildings should not be placed in the wetland or within that buffer zone. That said, I can recall multiple instances in which there were petitioners and applicants that came forward with proposals, with construction of driveways that went through conservancy or wetland areas. We looked at driveway widths, provisions of our ordinance for pull-offs for fire trucks and other emergency vehicles, culverts and things of the like. I don't recall any discussion or any action taken prohibiting the construction of driveway in those areas. I think, and Mr. Macy doesn't have the personal institutional knowledge of that, but he speaks the truth. And to that regard, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, Mr. Grabarczyk does not personally, nor does Mr. Janelli. They could talk to some of their predecessors, but I will tell you, and I'd invite my fellow plan commissioners to correct me if I'm wrong, but the impression that's been laid here this evening by some of the people who have approached that microphone is that that has been a prohibition in the town, is just a bunch of hooey. It's nothing more than that. So then we get into the issue, I mean, I have never considered that to be a violation of the ordinance, and to the extent that we're attempting, I think, to clean up some of that at this point in time, I'm going to support that part of the ordinance. And my understanding of it is that by so doing that, you're in compliance with the ordinance. I've got one other, I guess, technical comment, and then invite anybody else to it, and that would just be the text on that, and I'd kind of direct that to Mr. Barczyk or to Attorney Mace. I'm just a little concerned that the very last word in that proposed text change is wetland, and I know the part of the ordinance that exists now speaks twice about a conservancy district or conservancy district line, and I know last month I even raised the issue, just for my own edification, whether in fact the conservancy line and the wetland line were one and the same, and I'm just wondering, I asked that as a question, whether that verbiage at the end should say private driveways and bridges located in the conservancy district. And I invite your response to that, and again to Mr. Flanagan. You certainly, Ms. Van Sock, if the chair will allow it, can speak to what I've said, but that's the truth serum. For all the years that those of us on the Plan Commission, that's the way we use that ordinance.
Planner Ray Barczyk, do you have any input on whether we should change it to conservancy district or district line, or rather leave it at wetland?
Well, I just had a sidebar conversation with Engineer Janelli, and it's our understanding that the conservancy line and the wetland lines are one and the same.
And I guess I would just say, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but then do we need to have that understanding? Do we need to have that definition, or why do we want to interchange those within the text of the ordinance? I guess I asked that as a question.
And I don't know if I necessarily have an opinion. If we want to change it to conservancy, we can. I think the intent still reads the same.
Okay.
Attorney Macy, do you have any comment on that?
I'm looking at the different codes, and can we come back to that before we vote? I want to go and read some more of your conservancy district language and things like that. I just was checking all the county. I told you I stole it from the county, right or wrong. I admitted I stole it from the county because I thought if we tweaked it too much, they wouldn't say it was consistent with what their policy was.
Mr. Chairman, I'll pass the microphone to others. I do have, that's the only comments I have about that ordinance revision. I have a couple pertaining to the others, but if you prefer somebody to stay on that topic or whatever works for me.
Well, does anybody, do any of the other commission members have any comments on that?
I do have a question, I guess some clarification. Is it just county conservancy that takes into account woodlands and such, uplands? Or is that part of our code as well? Because in that case, wetlands and conservancy would not be one and the same.
The language is based on the language within our C1 code, and our C1 code talks about the streams, the intermittent streams, the wetlands, natural watersheds, existing natural woodlands, and natural environmental resources of the township is what it includes. And it's my understanding that those areas are encompassed within the C1 boundary, the mapped C1 boundary. If they're not mapped, the interpretation is that they're still part of the C1 district, because we do have some wetlands within the township that aren't necessarily mapped, but fall within the C1 district, in the intent of the C1 district.
I have another question too.
Can I just follow up on that, Dan?
Sure.
Just a minute. But I mean, then isn't the question, I thought I heard you say something about upland woodlands or whatever, so, and I'm pushing the envelope a little bit because I think we need to get this cleared up. We've got enough confusion and.
All right, we can't
People
read
that-
them out of context. I'll answer your question.
Okay.
First, I agree with everything that was said, but you got to read the whole paragraph. It's not long. I'll read it to you. It's a purpose section. It is not the definition section that they were reading from. Okay? The purpose says the primary purpose of this district is to preserve, protect, and enhance the streams, intermittent streams, and wetland areas of the Waukesha Township. Period. Okay? Then it goes on to say, the proper regulation of these areas will serve to maintain and improve water quality, both ground and surface, but it's streams, intermittent streams, and wetland areas, okay? Now you go up above, and it says, the boundaries of conservancy districts are drawn to be intended to represent the edge of a swamp, marsh, or floodland, or the high water line along a stream or water course, and shall be finally determined by the town plan commission and the town board by the actual field conditions of each specific situation. Within the C1 Conservancy District, the shaded area represents the approximate edge of a floodland shoreline district under the jurisdiction of Waukesha County. Boundaries of conservancy districts that include wetlands shall be field staked by the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Plan Commission or town-approved botanist and placed on a map by a registered land surveyor. The town board shall review and approve the wetland delineation. Okay, so the rest of it is important as part of the purpose, but it's streams, intermittent streams, and wetland areas, and they're determined under the procedure I stated, which is right above that. So it is not wildlife habitat. It's not flood damage. Those are goals, but that's not what the district is. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Then I guess I would just ask the question, if, and I understand that, if the opinion is that our definition of conservancy district, our definition, our ordinance, and wetland are one and the same, am I understanding that correctly? I mean, is that the Cliff, I mean, is that
Conservancy
the quick
and
version of that? Are one and the same?
Well, it's broader than that if you include streams and intermittent streams, but I would say that those are all going to be found to be wetlands anyway.
Well, they
But
are.
And so, if you want to cut to the quick, I think the word should be changed from wetland to conservancy,
Thank you, made my case.
or conservancy district, I think, more technically. No, I just wanted to go read it before I could answer your question.
That's fine.
But I agree with I think legally it's a better term to use, it's more consistent.
Anything further?
I have another question. When it comes time to replace and repair the several bridges we have in town, and I know that one of them in the town is going to need replacement or repair in the very near future, does this ordinance change allow us then to make those repairs and replacement? Without that change, we obviously cannot.
Engineer Janelli?
I think that was my underlying concern throughout was at what point, will the town have to rebuild the road or redo a culvert or a bridge or something, and then have this issue in the background, but ultimately we have to do the same thing that we're doing now in order to fix that, in my opinion. To allow us to repair that road or do that bridge or work within that buffer.
Does that answer your question, Chief?
Mm-hmm.
Can I just make sure everybody's speaking into their mics so then the video gets it?
Anything further? Do we want to take each of the proposed changes one by one?
I don't recommend from a legal standpoint you do it for the motion. You can continue to discuss them one by one if there's other issues on the assessor or any of the others. But the motion is to recommend, the motion as I hear it right now is either to recommend approval or recommend denial. If it's recommend approval, I assume Mr. Fisher would be asking you to change the word wetland to conservancy district in that location. You check the other one, Mr. Fisher, to see if we need to make it also in section 5.
Yeah, I was gonna leave that till there, but for consistency, I think it's gotta be picked up there as well. That'd be on the top of page 8. I think it's pretty much the last word on page 8.
Yes, and in A.
Correct.
1BA, the last word would also have to be stricken.
So your recommendation is to take all of these in one motion. Is that accurate?
Yes.
All right. Any discussion then on 13.2-10D?
I would like to speak to that, but courtesy, I'll let others go first.
Chief?
I'm looking at my notes here.
And then again, mine is a language issue, but on the top of page 3, under C, about a third of the way down the page, where there's language about recertification that says recertification of location of residential or agriculture accessory building. It begins that way. And I have some suggestions or concern, or would like some discussion about the end of the last sentence, which talks about the town building inspector having the right to request a recertification of any structure, location, and elevations if the structure is closer than 3 feet to the minimum offset setback or elevation requirements. My concern or suggestion on it is, when we're talking about recertification, that means after the residential or agricultural accessory building is built, to see where it was in fact built. I have a concern that I think that whole purpose of what we're trying to empower the building inspector to be able to do is to find out where the building is. So I don't know how the building inspector would know whether it is closer than 3 feet or further on top of it. And the other thing is the 3 foot to the minimum offset, setback, or elevation requirements. The elevation issue is a little bit different. I mean, my suggested verbiage would be something like, and maybe somebody could help, but the town building inspector shall have the right to request a recertification of any structure, location, and elevations if the town building inspector has reason to believe that the structure as constructed could violate the minimum offset, setback, or elevation requirements, or something to that effect. I think that 3 feet to me is a little too constraining, because that's the whole purpose of recertification, is to find out where it is. I invite comments.
Do you have a suggestion that you would like changed?
Yeah, and I can read it again for people's reaction to it, but the last part of the sentence that says structure, location, and elevations, if the structure, well, I would change it this way to say recertification of any structure, location, and elevations if the town building inspector has reason to believe that the structure as constructed could violate the minimum offset, setback, or elevation requirements. We do it again or something to that effect?
Well, the only comment I would have is I would hesitate to limit him to only once it's constructed, because he could check some of that when the footings are in.
Good point. Or
And I would want him to stop
Sure.
if the footings look like they
constructed
were
or partially constructed. I mean, we're agreeing on that. Recertification means it's in progress. I mean, that's a common thing, the footing of the foundation walls. I guess I'd like to just open that up a little bit. If he has any reasonable reason to believe that the offset, setback, or elevation requirements might violate our ordinances, that he could basically pull the pin and require recertification at that time.
I believe that was the intent in Plenary, Barczyk. If you could weigh in on this, I think maybe the appropriate language might have been something like of any structure, location, and elevations if the proposed structure is closer.
Well, I was gonna ask Attorney Macy, because I believe he's the internet. The language that's here came right from section 13-2-2B. I just copied it from the other section of our existing ordinance.
And that's okay, but maybe we need to take a look at that too. And even the Chairman Merrick, when I looked at this first, I mean, the question that I posed to myself is, were we talking about a proposed location, but then when we're in fact using the word recertification, that means to me that something physically has already been in place. It may not be completely built, but as Attorney Macy said, we've got footings or a foundation wall or something. I mean, that, I think, is the definition of recertification, that construction has begun.
Correct.
That is correct. In working with Building Inspector Montoya, he said that he was getting a lot of pushback early on in the process requiring a resident to do a full-blown certified survey map or plat of survey showing where the actual location of the building was. So now what we've done is we've allowed someone to do a plat of survey where they draw the building on to scale. What letter C allows him to do is that he goes out, it's my understanding, that he goes out and he inspects the location at the time that footings have been put in. And if he feels per section 13-2-2B that it's closer than within 3 feet from an offset or a setback, he requires a full survey to be done, or a full recert to be done at that point.
And I get that. All I'm trying to do, and we don't want anybody to abuse this, and I understand that I'm with that. I'm just a little bit troubled about the 3 feet, because he goes out there, I mean, he sees it on paper, doesn't really know where that lot line is, but if he's sufficiently concerned that it may be in violation, but why do we need, I mean, to say it's closer than 3 feet? If he knew exactly where it was, he wouldn't be calling for the recertification. I'm not trying to pick on words, I'm just trying to empower him in good faith to have a little bit more flexibility to do that.
My understanding is that if he's talking about if it's closer than 3 feet on paper, that he can require it to be recerted. So on paper, if it's on paper closer than 3 feet than the minimum setback, then Martin can look at it and say, I'm not sure if this is accurate, get a recertification.
That begs a good question. I mean, my first scribbled note when I read this was to change it to say, if the structure as proposed is closer than 3 feet. That was my first reaction to it, but then when I read the recertification, I mean, I think this can be read a couple different ways. So maybe just even wipe the language away and start with where Jamie was at. I mean, what you were kind of explaining, I think, was construction has begun.
That was my understanding, is that when Martin goes out and inspects it before walls physically go up, that if it's within 3 feet of a property line, he can request a recertification before it goes any further.
But how does he know it's within 3 feet? That's because it's on the proposed drawings.
Correct, but when he goes out and does a field verification, I think to the best of his knowledge, he tries to find where the property line is, and then he sees within that 3 foot threshold. If he's not certain, then he can request the recert. And I believe the 3 feet that's the threshold that he can go by according to section 13-2-2B. And I don't know if Attorney Macy has got to that section of the ordinance yet or not.
I did, and it does shed a lot of light onto it. The problem is for the supervisor, I think, and rightly so, is it's taken out of context. Okay? What we're trying to distinguish here is that when you get a building permit for other buildings other than the accessory structures, you have to do a plat of survey. And you have to prepare by the registered surveyor, and it lays everything out. So when we get to the end of that paragraph, it adds, and rightly so, but it's a somewhat lengthy paragraph. The building inspector shall have the right to request a recertification of any structure, location, and elevations if the structure is closer than 3 feet to the minimum offset setback and elevation requirements. But they've already done a plat of survey, and it's laid out in 3 or 4 sentences before that what has to be in that plat of survey and why and things like that. So pulling it out without all the other sentences does cause that confusion. So I definitely agree we should tighten it up. My rule is if somebody reads it and there's confusion, we should fix it, because we know now that's why you're the experts and you read them. If you have concerns with them, we should fix them.
I mean, I think for me the issue, we got a couple possible things going on. Somebody can bring a proposed plan showing where they're going to locate it, and guess what? Every time we look at those on paper, they always comply.
Correct.
They're 20 feet off. They're fine. somebody goes out to build it, they go buy the thing from a big box store and have somebody throw it together, they don't know where their property line is. And I don't wander, my neighbor cuts 12 feet of part of my yard, and he can do it as long as he wants, as long as he doesn't want an adverse possession. I mean, people don't know sometimes where those property lines are. So there's two things, he brings it on paper. On paper, they're almost all going to pass. So somebody says, I want it at the minimum 20 feet. The purpose of recertification, and not even when somebody, even if he gets a land surveyor to stake it out, no. Because somebody walks away, not unkindly, they move the stakes and build it someplace else. It's when you have physically put something in place that you basically, if there's a doubt about it, have to hire the surveyor to demonstrate that it's so. And we don't want anybody to abuse that, but that's how we get into this problem, because they're not built often where they are on paper.
Brian, they can pin the footing before they pour it. They can pin the footing before they pour it even. And all the surveyor, and we've done this, where he can establish, he can put a stake in where the lot line is, if it's 3 foot or 3'6" or 3'8", or that can be done before anything is done other than the excavation and pin the footing. Am I right?
Do you have any suggestions to take that?
Well, I have a policy, I have first a question for, and Martin's not here, so I'm hoping the engineer or the planner know. Is there a certification of an accessory structure to begin with? 'Cause this is recertification, so that's the first thing we have to clear up.
The way that our policy, or way that the accessory building ordinance works now is that if you have a plat of survey and it's to scale, you can utilize that. If you don't have a plat of survey, then we require a full certified survey map done of the property showing the location of the new structure.
But there's not like the certification for stake count or anything. I mean, they can build it on paper.
Not that I'm aware of, unless Martin has one.
I don't think so.
I thought when they encroached within, like 2 feet of the lot line, you guys always made them resurvey that lot line. When they encroached that within that 2 feet line.
Well, and I think here, per the ordinance, it was within 3 feet.
Right, but I thought.
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
since we've opened this up for change, why are we restricting it just to residential and agricultural buildings? Why are we discriminating?
I don't believe we are. In this section, we're actually pulling that language for residential and agricultural accessory buildings. I think in actual 13-2-B, that encapsulates all of the other building going on in the town.
That's true. That's a true statement. The other buildings are regulated under a section called building permit, section 13.2.2. Requirements, plat of survey. So what they're saying is the title of this one is accessory structures, and they're saying the only accessory structures we allow are residential or agricultural. I guess if you have a commercial accessory structure, it might be considered a principal structure, but it's not subject to this. It's not subject to this requirement. It was not supposed to be limiting, I don't think. I think they're trying to say that that's what this section deals with, but I don't know if there'd be a problem, Mr. Grabarczyk, if it's any accessory building.
The ordinance that we had before only limited it to residential and agricultural.
Supervisor Fisher, would we satisfy you if we put in the town building inspector shall have the right to request a recertification of any proposed structure location and any elevations if the proposed structure is closer than 3 feet to the minimum offset?
I think that, I don't like the word proposed in there again, because I mean, if somebody comes in, and let's say they're supposed to be 20 feet off the lot line, and they bring us a piece of paper that says that they're going to be 24 feet off the lot line, okay? And then they basically go and build this thing, the building inspector goes out there and looks at it and says, geez, I don't think that's where that's located. I want to be able to empower him to be able to require recertification.
So
If he
then-
goes out there and thinks it isn't built where it was proposed on paper,
So
that's
then-
my concern.
If we took out the 3 feet minimum,
No.
we proposed in and take 3 feet minimum? or-
I think the problem just, and I don't care if you say recertification or certification, I still haven't figured out whether we have certification to begin with, but I think all you'd have to do possibly is at the end say, at any time during the construction process or completion of the same. That's your point, right? At any time during the construction process or upon completion of the building. Does that address?
I think it was, and I would even take the 3 feet part out of it, I mean, trying to put into the words, but if he has reason to believe that the elevation or location of it violates the ordinance with regard to setback or elevation at any time during that construction process, I think he ought to have, with good faith without abusing something, but I think he ought to have the ability to require recertification at any point in that process.
So you want the limitation of 3 feet taken out? And I don't take issue with that either.
I think it's better that way.
Okay.
I mean, I think ultimately we're trying to get to, with this, the building inspector is the one that's gonna have to implement this. And if we're a little bit struggling as to what it means, it's certainly not gonna be clear to him as to what he's can do and what he can't do.
Planner Rybarczyk, can you read back what the new proposed language would be then?
I need the second part of Attorney Macy's comment. I have, at any time during the construction process,
Or upon completion of the building.
So perhaps it reads, the town building inspector shall have the right to request a recertification of any structural location and elevations, and then strike, starting from if
To the end.
to the end, and then your language.
At any time during the construction of the, maybe we should be consistent, construction of the building or upon completion of the same. Got that, Kathy? Or the mic does.
First one.
Anytime during the construction of the building or upon completion of the same, right? That's what you meant? And then he suggests if the building inspector has questions as to whether the building is legally located, I think is what you're saying.
And elevation. Location and elevation complies with our ordinances.
If the building inspection has reason to question whether the building
Meets.
location and elevation meet the
Sure.
requirements of the code?
Yep, offset, setback, and elevation meet the requirements of the ordinance.
So we're gonna. And we're going to, after certification of location, are we start keeping all of the first part of this? Or are we starting completely over?
No, we're starting from town building inspector, other right to request, and any
Certification.
structure and elevation, and stopping here, and then carrying forward with what you have.
At any time during the
Yes.
construction process. Completion of the same. The building inspector has reason to question whether the building location and elevation.
Let's go ahead and read that so everybody has a clear understanding.
I think I got it. So recertification of location for a residential or agricultural accessory building, the town building inspector shall have the right to request a recertification of any structure, location, and elevations at any time during the construction process or on completion of the same, if the building inspector has reason to question whether the building location and elevation meet the requirements of the code.
Does that work for everybody?
I think the only thing that I would say, last thing is, meet the requirements code, I think I would just put the part in there, meet the requirements for building offset, setback, and elevation. I think then it's abundantly clear.
Meet the requirements, instead of the code, meet the requirements of offset and setback.
Meet the requirements for minimum offset, setback, and elevation.
Got it. Section 13.2-9 sub 12, in-law unit. Any questions? Chief?
The only concern I have really isn't part of the change that was made, it's part of the ordinance that is not part of the change. I'm not sure if that allows us to make that change or not. It's a pretty simple change.
Share it with us.
On letter G, it requires them to put in smoke alarms, and we should probably change that to require smoke detectors and CO detectors. I don't believe that we have the authority to force them to put in a fire alarm.
What was the intent, if you know, Chief, for the original ordinance? Detectors, alarms was always the wrong word?
Correct.
I don't have a problem with switching alarms to detectors, but I don't know about it changing CO without, that changes the ordinance, we'd have to hold a public hearing, that's a different device.
CO is a building requirement anyway, it's covered under building permits anyway.
Both are, so it's really rather redundant.
Correct.
Okay.
Well,
It's just a vocabulary.
is alarms by technical phraseology a wired system to a company? Is that what your concern is?
It doesn't have to be to a company, but it generally refers to a wired system in the structure. There are silent alarms and there are alarms that go to a company.
But silent alarms are, I'm sorry, I don't, what's a silent alarm? Where does that go?
It doesn't go anywhere, it stays within the building, but
It just notifies itself.
and it's far more expensive to put in than detectors.
I think you want to change alarm to detector. That's the bottom line.
Correct.
And
It's really irrelevant, I mean, it can stay, but.
okay, then let's move on if it's irrelevant to you. Anybody else on in-law suites?
I have a little one. How are we gonna stop, I'm all in favor of this, but how do you stop them turning them into like a duplex?
Attorney Macy?
Well, the practical answer to that, of course, is you don't. So the best safeguard you have is you put the deed restriction on, and then you respond to complaints if you receive complaints. That's the best you can do. Yeah, we have one community that requires every in-law unit to file on a yearly basis that it's still being used only by in-laws and put them in writing, but they just feel that concerned about it, and that's a requirement. Whenever they approve a conditional use for an in-law unit, they require a yearly report. But it's an actual problem when you allow them, and the more segregated they are, of course, the more potentiality that they could try to rent them out. But there's nothing you can do other than to respond to complaints. I mean, that's just the practicality of the situation, to be honest.
So are they required to, in our town here, I'm sorry, to redo it every year, I guess that's my question.
Not at this point.
Not at this point.
I think this is a pretty rare circumstance. It's the first one that I've seen come before us. How often have you seen it?
And there's been some in the town that's been operating for years, Ma lived upstairs in the bedroom, there was a stove over there. But that was not unusual. And I think it's the right thing to do because it is, I think, in the future, you're going to see even more of this as families are forced to telescope.
Anything else on in-law suites? Then on to subsection 13-2-24, limited jurisdiction. Again, with in-law suites, any questions on that? Supervisor Fisher? Good?
Nothing.
Yeah. And then on to 13-3-3, Conservancy District. And I think we've agreed that we're going to change the last word from wetland to Conservancy District. Anything else on that? Then do we have a motion to recommend to the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve ordinance number 2015-01 in its entirety, subject to the changes that we just discussed with tonight.
With, and did you say with the changes that we've discussed? Is there a second?
The motion said to approve, but it's a recommendation to the town board.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
I have a little comment. This might not in regard to that, but I guess I'd recommend if, there's a couple of zoning changes that are, everyone's a huge issue or, for everybody, and I guess it'd be nice, I know in the past, sometimes we've had workshops to do this type of thing. I'd prefer if, we're doing a lot of citizens here tonight. I think we could probably do this and bring it back to the citizen when it's, hash it out. Be a lot easier, I think.
Are you saying in the future?
Yes, I think that'd be a good thing if we could maybe put that, I know we have.
We did have a workshop, you were in Florida.
Yes, I would. But I think that would be a good thing that we could have it all set in stone, so.
I agree.
So if we could do that, it'd be great.
Okay. Anything further?
I'd like to make a comment now that I made the motion.
Mike?
I'm sorry.
You gotta turn it on. No, the green button.
The green button is on.
There you go.
Just bring it closer to you.
Yes, first of all, I've said it in the last meeting, this is an excellent use of this property, and it's in an excellent location. And I think,
We'll do that next time.
oh, I'm sorry, I thought we did.
No, we're still on zoning changes.
Well, you know what's coming.
Yeah, we know what it's all about.
All right, anything further on 6? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to 7. Discussion and possible action on the site plan of operation. The owner is 5 Diamonds Inc., applicant is Tom Kilnick. The location is West 234, South 3555, West Paul Parkway. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Commissioner Flanagan, do you have something you'd like to share?
Yes. I think we have an excellent use of property here, and I've always was in favor of this baseball park. Now, regarding the parking, when this was originally laid out, this encapsulates all of the parking on the east side of the property. Nobody mentioned the word safety in automobiles, and you got kids running around. This is a perfect way to do this. So I'm just saying, it'll be a value enhancer to the township, and the proposed building back here is really, it's not in anybody's line of sight. So, that's why I'm making a motion to approve.
Since there's a motion on the table, is there a second?
I'll second for discussion purposes.
Thank you.
We need to have the petitioner present the revised plan and we need a vote report to get it all in. It's okay to have the motion, but
Jamie, why don't you go ahead and start off, please?
We had the proposal last month before the Plan Commission. One of the issues, a couple issues were raised. One of the big issues was location of the building within the 30-foot buffer and the interpretation of what the petitioner can and can't do within the 30-foot buffer. Since that meeting, they have proposed or have presented to staff a new set of plans. They have moved the building to the north, and in doing so, they basically truncated the outfield of the Capital Memorial High School baseball diamond to allow them to move the entire building to the north. So the way that the new building sits, it's completely outside of the wetland. It is outside of the 30-foot buffer. And the drawings that they have showed is that there will be no grading within the 30-foot buffer or the wetlands. So that was one issue that was brought up. Since then, I have received some comments with regard to the total parking stalls. On the plan set that I received, it shows under the notes that there's 132 new parking stalls. I did communicate with Greg. I only count 86 parking stalls, and that's 86 parking stalls within 500 feet of the entrance. So that's the lot directly north of the multi-use fields, and then the parking lot that is to the east of the front entryway. As I had mentioned during the public hearing comment, and as was brought up by a resident, in our current code, we do not have an exact match that tells us how many parking spaces they should be having for an indoor sports facility. They're not a retail establishment, they're not a wholesale establishment, they're not a school, they're not a dental office, etc. So I did put under the town policy section that right now they're proposing the 86 parking stalls. It equates to roughly one parking stall per 2 patrons. They're basing the 86 parking stalls on a capacity of 150 patrons within a given day. That 150 patrons is what they submitted to Waukesha County for their sanitary sewer permit in their calculations. They have stated that they feel the 86 parking stalls is ample because one, the 150 patrons per day will not be using the facility all at the same time. Two is that each patron that is there for roughly a 60 to 90 minute workout, and then they're gone. And three is that a portion of the people that will be using the facility will be children, and they are typically dropped off and picked up by a parent or a guardian. So again, from the standpoint of our ordinances, there's nothing that I can use to validate that the 86 parking stalls is adequate. So I think that that is before the Town Plan Commission and the Town Board tonight to determine. The Plan Commission did last month determine that the use of the property within the P1 zoning district was appropriate. We did have a discussion with regard to the exterior materials, and again, the Plan Commission felt that the materials that were being presented were appropriate. And they were deficient within their landscape plantings around the building per our ordinance. As part of the new submittal, they did submit additional plantings, and they now are in compliance with the minimum requirements of our landscape plan. So with that, I put together a list of conditions, and what I did based on some recommendations I received from a resident, I put them in a form that I think is more telling as to how it's going to operate. So on page 3, you have conditions that are for both the baseball complex and the indoor sports training facility. And these are conditions that transferred over from the existing plan of op for the baseball diamond. And then at the bottom, you have the conditions that the baseball complex will be operating under. And then the last page is the conditions that the indoor sports training facility will be operating under. I also did add a condition in there talking about the lights on the building, exterior of the building, and the lights in the parking lot need to be shut off after hours of operation. That was one other item that was raised with regard to the application from last month. And the hours of operation for the baseball diamond, gotta get to them. They are Sunday to Saturday, 7 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. And no field or parking lights can be on before 7 a.m. or after 10:30 p.m. And employees are allowed 24-hour access. That's what was agreed to as part of the baseball complex. The indoor sports complex, they are asking for Sunday to Saturday, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And again, no building or parking lights on before 6 a.m. or after 11 p.m. And employees are allowed access 24 hours a day. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it back over to the Planning Commission for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the representatives?
One change that I'd like to discuss is
Please.
the parking lot lighting, building lighting. It's very common to leave the exit lights, the exterior lights on for security purposes and for exiting if someone's there cleaning or what have you. It's a security issue. If we shut everything off out there, it's wide open for vandalism.
Which lights would you propose? Where on what parts of the building?
The parking lot lighting and the
Not all of the parking lot lighting. You wouldn't leave that on all night.
we can turn off the parking lot lighting on the furthest lot out, but the lot right in front of the building.
How many heads are you talking about?
Plus the exit lighting.
Okay, and that's a wall pack?
Yeah.
7-inch wide.
70 watt or LED equivalent.
Ask a related question, Mr. Chairman, please. Do we have, and maybe we got it or looked at previously, do we have, or I'll propose this, Jamie, do we have photometrics, point-by-point photometrics of the exterior lighting?
We do. It should be the second to the last drawing of the packet. If not, then
Can you be sure when you're speaking that you get closer to the mic, please?
Sure.
Just looking at this ever so quickly, and maybe the petitioners can help us with that, but the thing that we've got here from Rude Lighting, I see photometrics, but I don't see photometrics for the lot right in front of the building. Am I missing something?
You're correct. They did not show a light in front of it. There's supposed to be a light on the building shining out of the parking lot of the, directly in front of the building or due east of the building. There would also be a small 70 watt or equivalent on the exit doors that were not located at that time, but they're minor.
Well, I think we've got, from my perspective, I think we've got two issues here with regard to exterior lighting. The one that's been talked about is what lights for extended hours. I mean, I think if we're going to do this right, we really ought to see two drawings with photometrics. One would be I think that's isn't that probably part of our ordinance, Jamie? Don't we require photometrics? assuming that we do, but I would think that we ought to require and look at point-by-point photometrics for that entire area, I mean, all the way up to the property lines when all of the lights would be on, and then if we're talking about a reduction, your request would be for number of lights for other parts of the evening or whatnot. I think we really ought to see a separate photometric for that.
Is that something we can handle in staff?
Yeah, at the moment, that's not my answer, I'm just making that as a suggestion.
We're just asking to leave the one light on in front of the building and the exit light.
And I understand exactly what you're saying, but all I'm saying, for us to do our due diligence, and I don't think this is an insurmountable type of thing from my perspective. I mean, it could be a condition of approval, but I think we need, I mean, you've got it for along that east property line, you've got it for the north 2/3 roughly of the site. I think we need the rest of it, and I think it needs to be reviewed by staff. Basically, correct me, is our ordinance, do we allow any level of illumination at the property line? Do you know that off the top of your head, Jamie?
For the off-street parking, it says lights provided in any parking area shall be hooded or beamed so as not to create undesirable glare of illumination or of adjacent property.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that at least at a staff level, we need to see the point-by-point photometrics on that.
Supervisor Fisher, would you want that to be a condition then? That photometrics are reviewed by staff, showing
Yes.
no glare at the property line?
Yes, for me, and I think it really should be, I think we ought to require photometrics both for when all of the lights would be powered up, and if you're talking about a reduction of some of that for other hours, I think it'd be reasonable to ask for the photometrics in both. That's a really easy thing for the lighting people to provide, it's not a big thing, but it's an important thing.
And there is, on the photometrics there, it does indicate a line where it's 0.2 foot candles, and we're still in the parking lot.
I'm just finishing up, I don't have any reason to doubt that you can do it, it's just that you need to prove it, and it needs to be on file at the town.
We'll do that.
Chief Buchholz? Anything?
As far as fire code, they meet all fire codes, and I'm satisfied that they've committed to putting in the accesses we need.
Thank you. Commissioner White?
I just like to concur with Mr. Fisher about the photoelectric. I think we need to do that.
I agree. So one of the conditions then would be that you get with Jamie and have photometrics at 0 at the lot lines.
We'll do
And
that.
then exit lighting only being a safety light that would be on. Would that be acceptable?
Yes.
Anything further? Then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And we have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. And we take 5 minutes or so.
I don't work, yeah. I walked off. Yeah, but that.
Long evening? You get paid by the hour, don't you? Double time after 8 o'clock? How you doing? Very good. Good.
Aunts, uncles, cousins, sister, mother, father, they're all. Good night. So crazy as it sounds. I haven't gotten 30 years Usually we only go for Thursday So every time I go down there, he was here just 15
Yeah, I get
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the town board meeting to order at 8:28 p.m., March 12th, 2015. If we can find our clerk treasurer, where'd she disappear to?
Maybe she thought we were done.
I think we're gonna wait for a moment.
Excuse me.